The universe was full of life. Thousands of species lived among the stars. They built great cities on distant planets. They traveled through space in ships that moved faster than light. They traded with each other, fought with each other, and made peace with each other. But there was one world that all of them feared: Earth. The Galactic Council had a system for classifying planets. Most worlds where life existed were Category 1 or Category 2. These were gentle places with calm weather, stable ground, and peaceful ecosystems. Some planets were Category 5 or Category 6. These were harder places, with strong storms or dangerous animals. Very few planets reached Category 7 or Category 8. These were considered extreme, nearly impossible for intelligent life to develop. Earth was Category 9, the highest classification. The Council scientists could not understand how any species could survive there. Earth had massive storms that destroyed entire regions. It had earthquakes that split the ground open. It had volcanoes that buried cities in fire. The planet was covered in predators that hunted and killed. Even the smallest creatures carried poison and disease. The weather changed constantly, from burning heat to freezing cold. The very air carried invisible threats that could kill the unprepared. And yet humans had evolved there. They had not only survived but built a civilization. They had reached the stars. This terrified the galaxy. The other species watched humans carefully. They kept their distance. They traded with Earth only when necessary. They feared what these might do if they ever decided to conquer. After all, what kind of monsters could thrive on a world designed to kill? But the galaxy did not truly understand humans. Not yet. Lieutenant sat alone in the monitoring station. It was late at night and her shift was almost over. The Deep Space Monitoring Station floated in orbit around Mars. Its massive antenna arrays pointed toward the endless darkness of space. His job was to listen. She listened for signals from human ships. She listened for messages from alien traders. And sometimes, though rarely, she listened for something else. Distress calls. The screen in front of her flickered. Sat up straight in her chair. A signal was coming through, but it was weak and broken. She adjusted the equipment, trying to clean up the transmission. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls. The signal became clearer. It was not in any human language. The computer began to translate, matching the patterns to known alien speech. His blood went cold. The message was from she knew about them. Everyone in the fleet did. They were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They were gentle herbivores with soft purple skin and large, kind eyes. They were known as healers and teachers. They built libraries and hospitals on dozens of worlds. They had no military because they believed in peace above all things. The translation appeared on screen, and she read it with growing horror. Please, anyone who can hear us. They have come, the Dominion. Their ships fill our sky. They are taking our people. They are taking our children. We have no weapons. We cannot fight. Please, someone help us. Anyone, we are dying. Our world is dying. Please. The message repeated, again and again, a desperate cry into the void of space. Immediately contacted Admiral. She did not care that it was the middle of the night. She did not care about protocol. Some things could not wait. Admiral was an old man with gray hair and deep lines on his face. He had served in the fleet for 40 years. He had seen humanity's first contact with alien life. He had fought in the border wars that followed. He had buried friends and enemies alike. Nothing surprised him anymore. But when he heard the distress signal, his jaw tightened. "How many ships?" he asked. Checked her data. "Over 2,000, sir. They've surrounded the entire planet." "And the population?" "Approximately 800 million, sir. All civilian. They have no military, no defense systems." Was silent for a long moment. He knew the well. They were slavers. They moved through the galaxy, taking whatever they wanted. They captured entire populations and sold them as labor, as entertainment, as food. The Galactic Council condemned them, but the Council did nothing. They were too powerful and their territory was too far from Council space. There was 400 light-years from Earth. It would take 3 days to reach them at maximum speed. By then, millions would already be taken. Has the Council responded to the distress call? Asked. No, sir. The signal has been broadcasting for 6 hours. No Council species has moved to help. They won't, said quietly. They never do. He walked to the window of his quarters and looked out at the stars. Earth floated below, blue and green and beautiful. That had created humanity. The planet that had taught them to fight, to endure, to never give up. Thought about the children being dragged from their homes. He thought about the parents who could not protect them. He thought about the silence of the galaxy, the way every species looked away when something terrible happened to someone else. Humans were different. Earth had taught them many things, but perhaps the most important lesson was this. In a universe full of danger, you could not stand alone. You needed others, and when others needed you, you answered. Lieutenant, said, his voice hard as iron, wake the 7th Fleet. All hands, we leave in 4 hours. Felt her heart pound. Sir, the Council has warned us not to interfere in galactic affairs. If we act without permission. I don't need the Council's permission to save innocent lives, interrupted. Contact Fleet Command. Tell them Admiral is invoking Emergency Protocol 7. Protocol 7. Knew what that meant. It was the authorization for immediate military action in response to a humanitarian crisis. It had only been used twice in human history. Yes, sir, she said, right away. Across Earth and the colonies, the call went out. Soldiers woke from their sleep. Engineers rushed to their ships. Pilots ran to their fighters. Doctors packed medical supplies. In bases and stations across human space, the 7th Fleet came alive. Captain received the order while visiting her family in. She had taken leave to spend time with her daughter, a bright 6-year-old girl named. When her communicator buzzed with the emergency signal, knew immediately that her vacation was over. Mommy has to go, she told, kneeling down to look into her daughter's eyes. Where are you going? Asked. Far away, to help some people who are in trouble. Will you be back soon? Hugged her daughter tightly. As soon as I can, I promise. She did not know if she would keep that promise. She did not know if she would survive what was coming, but she knew one thing for certain. She could not ignore the cries of the innocent. No human could. Within 3 hours, the 7th Fleet was assembled. 47 warships of various sizes, from massive carriers to fast destroyers. 12,000 Marines, ready to fight on land or in space. 200 fighter squadrons, each pilot trained to fly through hell itself. Admiral stood on the bridge of the flagship, the carrier Eternal Dawn. Around him, officers worked at their stations, preparing for the jump to hyperspace. Sir, one officer reported, the Council is sending a message. They're demanding to know why we've mobilized. Tell them we received a distress call and we're responding, said. Tell them that's what civilized species do. The fleet entered hyperspace. The stars stretched into lines of light, and then they were gone, racing toward a world they had never seen to save people they had never met. Because that was what humans did. Because that was what we're for. The 7th Fleet moved through hyperspace like a pack of wolves racing through darkness. 47 ships, each one carrying humans who had chosen to fight for strangers. They had 3 days before they reached 3 days to prepare for war. On the destroyer Iron Will, Captain gathered her crew. She looked at their faces and saw determination, fear, and something else. Something that burned in every human heart when they heard about injustice. Anger. You've all read the reports, said. They are peaceful people, they have never harmed anyone, and now they are taking them as slaves, harvesting them like animals. She paused, letting her words sink in. The galaxy expects us to do nothing. They expect us to be afraid of just like everyone else. They're wrong. A young officer raised his hand. Captain, they have over 2,000 ships. We have 47. How do we win? Smiled, it was not a kind smile. They have never fought humans before. They don't know what we can do. They don't know what we're willing to endure. That's our advantage. She pulled up a display showing the Iron Will's weapon systems that could punch through armor at incredible distances, missiles that could track targets across thousands of kilometers, point defense systems that could shoot down incoming fire in milliseconds. We hit them fast, we hit them hard, we don't give them time to think. Every second we fight, we buy time for the people down on that planet. Every ship we destroy is one less ship to carry slaves. Understood? Yes, Captain, the crew responded as one. In another part of the fleet, Sergeant was briefing his Marines. They were hard men and women, trained to fight in every environment. Deserts, jungles, ice fields, zero gravity. They had been pulled from Arctic survival training when the call came, and they were ready for something warmer. Listen up, said. Our job is to board the harvester ships and rescue the prisoners inside. They are big. Average height is about 3 meters. They have armored shells and sharp claws. They're strong and they're mean. He showed them images of soldiers. The Marines studied them carefully, noting weak points in the armor, patterns in movement. But here's what they don't have, continued. They don't have endurance. They tire quickly. They can't handle pain the way we can, and they've never fought anyone who wasn't afraid of them. Private, the youngest Marine in the squad, raised her hand. Sergeant, what about the prisoners? How do we keep them safe during the fighting? His expression softened. Good question. They are fragile. They scare easily. When you find them, stay calm. Speak softly. Let them know you're there to help. Remember, they've never seen humans before. To them, we might look just as scary as the... We're not scary, another Marine joked. We're adorable. The squad laughed, but's face remained serious. To us, maybe. To them, we're predators from a death world. We have forward-facing eyes like hunters. We have teeth designed to tear meat. We're covered in barely any protective features, yet we survive everything. That terrifies other species. He looked at his squad, meeting each person's eyes. So when you find those prisoners, remember, you're not just a soldier. You're proof that monsters can be kind. Don't let them down. On the flagship Eternal Dawn, Doctor was working in the medical bay. She had not slept since the fleet launched. There was too much to do. She had downloaded everything known about biology. Their purple blood was copper-based, different from human iron-based blood. Their bones were lighter, more fragile. They could not handle high gravity or sudden movements. Their immune systems were weak compared to humans. But they could be saved, if she worked fast enough, if she prepared well enough. Doctor, one of her nurses said, you need to rest. You've been working for 16 hours straight. Shook her head. I'll rest when they are safe. Right now, I need to prepare trauma kits. We'll be receiving wounded the moment we arrive. She continued working, her hands moving with practiced speed. Around her, the medical team followed her example. They prepared operating rooms. They stocked blood substitutes. They practiced emergency procedures again and again until they could perform them in their sleep. Admiral walked through the ship, checking on his crew. He stopped in the hangar bay, where fighter pilots were running through simulations. Lieutenant was the best pilot in the fleet. He sat in a simulator, his hands dancing across controls as he fought virtual enemies. Even in practice, his movements were sharp and precise. Lieutenant said, immediately stopped the simulation and stood at attention. Admiral. At ease, how are your squadrons? Ready, sir. We've been practicing formation attacks designed to break through defensive lines. Their ships are slower than ours, less maneuverable. We can fly circles around them. Confidence is good, said, but don't underestimate them. They've conquered dozens of worlds. They didn't do that by being weak. I understand, sir. We won't let you down. Nodded and moved on. He visited every section of the ship. He spoke with engineers who kept the engines running. He spoke with weapons officers who kept the guns loaded. He spoke with the cooks who kept everyone fed. Every person he met had the same look in their eyes: determination, purpose. They knew why they were here. They knew what they were fighting for. On the second day of the journey, called a fleet-wide broadcast, every human on every ship gathered to listen. In a few hours, began, we will arrive at the. We will face an enemy that outnumbers us by more than 40 to 1. The galaxy expects us to fail. They expect us to die. They believe that no species would sacrifice so much for strangers. He paused, looking into the camera that carried his image to every screen in the fleet. They don't understand us. They classify our home as and think that makes us killers. They see our strength and think we only use it to destroy. They are wrong. His voice grew stronger. We did not evolve on Earth by fighting alone. We survived by protecting each other, by running into danger when others ran away, by standing between the weak and the strong. That is what makes us human, not our weapons, not our ships, our hearts. He took a breath. The call for help. Every species in the galaxy heard them. Only we answered. When this battle is over, the galaxy will understand something they never knew before. They will understand that are not monsters. His eyes hardened. We are the ones who fight the monsters. We are the ones who protect the innocent. And they are about to learn what happens when they threaten people under our protection. He raised his fist. No mercy for slavers. No mercy for those who harm children. No mercy for anyone who preys on the helpless. We are humanity, and we are coming. The broadcast ended. Throughout the fleet, humans cheered. They beat their fists against walls and stomped their feet against floors. The sound traveled through metal and air, a thunder of defiance that echoed through space. In her quarters, Captain held a small photograph of her daughter. She kissed it gently and whispered, "I'm doing this for you, for the future, so you can grow up in a galaxy where someone always answers when you call for help." In the Marine barracks, Sergeant checked his weapons one final time. He had fought in many battles, but this one felt different. This one meant something. In the medical bay, Doctor finally allowed herself to rest. She lay down on a cot, her mind still racing through procedures and treatments. She dreamed of purple-skinned children looking up at her with grateful eyes. And in his ready room, Admiral stared at the stars streaking past. He thought about his own children, grown now with families of their own. He thought about his, safe on Earth, unaware of the danger he was flying toward. He made a silent promise, not to his family, not to his crew, but to those who had never met a human and did not know that help was coming. Hold on, he thought, we're almost there, just hold on a little longer. The fleet raced through hyperspace, 47 ships, 12,000 Marines, 200 fighter squadrons, all of them ready to do what no one else in the galaxy would do. Save strangers because it was right. Because that was what humans did. The 7th Fleet dropped out of hyperspace, and the crew saw hell. That had once been beautiful. Records showed a planet covered in silver forests and crystal-clear lakes. Cities of white stone had risen among gentle hills. They had built gardens and libraries and temples to knowledge. They had lived in peace for 10,000 years. Now their world was burning. Smoke rose from every major city. Great fires spread across the silver forests, turning them to ash. The crystal lakes reflected the orange glow of destruction, and in the sky, blocking out the stars, hung the fleet. Over 2,000 ships. Massive harvester vessels with cargo holds large enough to carry millions of prisoners. Warships with weapons that had crushed dozens of species. Transport ships moving constantly between the fleet and the surface, carrying their living cargo to waiting slave markets. Admiral stood on the bridge of the eternal dawn and felt cold fury fill his chest. He had seen atrocities before. He had witnessed the worst that intelligent beings could do to each other, but this was something beyond his experience. "Status report," he ordered, his voice controlled and steady. Sir, I'm detecting approximately 2,300 vessels, Lieutenant reported from her station. They've established a blockade around the entire planet. Harvester ships are actively collecting population from the surface. Any sign they've noticed us? Not yet, sir. We emerged from hyperspace behind the planet's largest moon. We have cover for now. Nodded, the element of surprise was everything. The expected no resistance. They had grown lazy, hunting prey that could not fight back. All ships prepare for combat, commanded. Fighter squadrons launch on my signal. Destroyer groups, I want you targeting the harvester ships. Carriers will provide support and draw fire from the main fleet. Marines prepare for boarding action. Throughout the fleet, humans moved to their positions. Pilots climbed into fighters. Gunners powered up weapons. Marines checked their armor and ammunition one final time. Captain stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, watching the tactical display. Her ship was positioned at the front of the destroyer group. They would be the first to engage. Captain, her first officer said, they haven't detected us yet. Should we wait for their formation to spread out? Shook her head. Every minute we wait, more are taken. We go now. She opened a channel to her crew. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to engage a force that outnumbers us 40-1. I won't lie to you. Some of us won't make it home. She paused, looking at the burning planet on her. But I'd rather die fighting for something right than live knowing I stood by and did nothing. Battle stations, all ahead full. The Iron Will surged forward. Behind it, the rest of the destroyer group followed. They rounded the moon and came face to face with the fleet. For a long moment, nothing happened. The sensors registered the human ships, but the information took time to process. No one had ever challenged them. No one had ever dared. Then the human fired. The Iron Will's main battery released a barrage of magnetically accelerated projectiles. They crossed the distance in seconds, moving faster than any weapon could track. The first cruiser never even saw the attack. One moment it was floating peacefully, supervising the harvest. The next moment, it exploded in a ball of fire and debris. Direct hit, reported. Target destroyed, picking new target. The fleet erupted in chaos. Warning signals blared across their communication channels. Ship commanders screamed orders in their harsh, clicking language. They had never seen weapons like this. They had never felt this kind of fear. Lieutenant led his fighter squadron through the enemy formation. His craft was small and fast, designed for quick strikes against larger vessels. The point defense weapons tried to track him, but he moved too quickly, changing direction in ways that would kill most alien pilots. Humans could handle G-forces that would crush other species. Their bodies were built to endure stress and pain that seemed impossible to gentler beings. Pulled a 9G turn, his vision going gray at the edges, then immediately flipped his fighter and fired missiles into a destroyer's engine section. The ship lost power and began to drift, was already gone, racing toward his next target. Squadron, form up on me, he ordered. We're hitting the harvester ships next. Those are the priority targets. Every one we destroy is 1,000,000 lives saved. His squadron followed without hesitation. They dove toward the massive harvester vessels, dodging fire from panicked gunners. These were not warriors. These were slavers accustomed to easy prey. They did not know how to fight something that fought back. On the command ship, Al watched the battle unfold with growing horror. The enemy ships were small, only 47 vessels. His fleet numbered in the thousands. And yet somehow, his ships were dying. "What species is this?" he demanded. "Why are they attacking us?" "Unknown, Commander," one of his officers replied. "Our databases have limited information. They appear to be from a Category 9 designated Sol 3. Al's mandibles clicked with confusion. No civilized species comes from a. "Perhaps they are not civilized, Commander." Al watched another of his ships explode. The enemy moved with terrible coordination. Their weapons fired with impossible accuracy. Their pilots performed maneuvers that should have killed them. He opened a broadcast channel. "Unknown vessels, this is Commander Al of the Dominion. Withdraw immediately. This harvest is sanctioned by Dominion law. You have no authority here. If you continue your attack, you will be destroyed." The response came from a human voice, calm and cold. "This is Admiral of the Terran 7th Fleet. We don't recognize your law, we recognize theirs." A video file accompanied the message. Al opened it and saw footage from the planet's surface, children being dragged from their homes, parents screaming as they were separated from their families, elderly being beaten when they moved too slowly. "We received their distress call," Admiral continued. "We came to answer it." Al's blood ran cold. They had crossed 400 light-years to answer a call from a species they had never met. They had brought a fleet to fight an enemy that outnumbered them 40-1, and they showed no signs of stopping. "Commander," an officer reported urgently, "we've lost 17 ships. The enemy is focusing on our harvester vessels." "Then protect them," Al screamed. "All warships engage the enemy, destroy them." The fleet finally began to organize. Warships moved to intercept the human destroyers. Fighters launched to meet the human squadrons. For a moment, it seemed like the sheer weight of numbers would turn the tide. But the humans did not stop. They did not retreat. They did not hesitate. Captain's Iron Will took a direct hit to its port side. Alarms screamed as damage reports flooded the bridge. Hull breaches on decks 7-9. Casualties reported in the forward sections. Main power fluctuating. "Damage control, seal those breaches," ordered. "Redirect power from non-essential systems. Keep those guns firing." Her crew obeyed without question. They moved through smoke and flames, patching holes in the hull, carrying wounded to safety, keeping the ship fighting. A vessel had lost its entire engine section to far less damage. The Iron Will kept going. That was the difference between and everyone else. Humans did not break. Humans did not quit. They fought until they won or until they died. And they were not ready to die. Squadron reached the first harvester ship. Its cargo hold was full of prisoners, packed together like cargo. The fighter pilots had to be careful. They couldn't destroy the ship outright without killing the prisoners inside. "Target the engines and weapons only," ordered. "Disable the ship. Marines will handle the rest." His squadron made precision strikes against the harvester's critical systems. One by one, the ship's weapons went silent. Its engines flickered and died. It began to drift, helpless, waiting for boarding parties. Across the battlefield, the pattern repeated. Human ships struck with overwhelming force, targeting weapons and engines while leaving prisoners unharmed. Marines prepared to launch from the carriers, ready to board the disabled vessels and rescue the inside. Admiral watched the battle from his command center, tracking every ship, every squadron, every engagement. They had lost 3 destroyers and dozens of fighters, but they had destroyed over 100 vessels and disabled a dozen harvesters. "Sir," Lieutenant reported, "they are attempting to regroup. Their main fleet is forming a defensive line around the remaining harvester ships." Nodded. "Then we break through that line. Signal all ships, concentrate fire on their center, punch a hole and get our Marines through." The human fleet turned as one. Every gun, every missile, every fighter focused on a single point in the formation. The fire was overwhelming, devastating, unstoppable. The line shattered. And through the gap, the Marine transports flew, carrying soldiers ready to fight for people they had never met. Because that was what humans did. Because that was what it meant to be from Earth. The Marine transport shook violently as it approached the harvester ship. Enemy fire streaked past the windows, bright flashes of energy that could destroy the small vessel in a single hit. But the pilot was skilled, weaving between the attacks with movements that seemed impossible. Sergeant held onto his safety harness, watching his squad. 12 Marines, all of them ready, all of them focused. 30 seconds to breach, the pilot announced. Addressed his team one final time. Remember the mission. Rescue the prisoners, protect the innocent, and don't underestimate they're bigger than us, stronger than us, but they've never fought humans before. Show them why the galaxy calls us. The transport slammed into the harvester's hull. Cutting lasers burned through the metal, creating an opening. Air rushed out as the two atmospheres mixed. Then the Marines were through, boots hitting the deck, weapons raised. The corridor was dark and filled with strange smells. Ships were designed for beings much larger than humans. The ceilings were 3 meters high. The doorways were wide enough for 3 Marines to walk through side by side. Move out, ordered. 2 teams. Take half the squad and clear the left corridor. I'll take the right. We meet at the cargo hold. Private nodded and led her team away. She was the youngest Marine in the battalion, only 20 years old. Some had questioned whether she was ready for combat. Those questions had stopped after her training scores came in. She was fast, accurate, and absolutely fearless. His team moved through the right corridor, checking each room they passed. They found storage areas filled with chains and restraints. They found processing rooms where prisoners were ensorted. They found barracks where soldiers slept. The soldiers were awake now. The first came around a corner and froze when it saw the humans. It was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in a hard shell like an insect. Its claws were long and sharp, designed to tear flesh. Its eyes were black and empty, without any hint of mercy. For a moment, neither side moved. Then they roared and charged. His team opened fire. Their weapons were designed to punch through armor, and they did their job well. The staggered blue blood spraying from wounds in its shell, but it kept coming, driven by rage and instinct. Private stepped forward and met the charge head-on. He ducked under the claws and drove his combat knife up into the creature's throat. They made a wet, gurgling sound and collapsed. Clear, reported, wiping his blade. Nodded, keep moving. On the other side of the ship, his team encountered heavier resistance. A squad of soldiers had barricaded themselves in a corridor, blocking the path to the cargo hold. They're protecting the prisoners, realized. They don't want us to reach them. She studied the barricade. They were using cargo containers as cover, their weapons pointed down the corridor. Any direct approach would result in heavy casualties. Private said, "Can you get into the ventilation system?" Was small, the shortest Marine in the squad. She looked up at the ceiling, where a vent cover was barely visible in the dim light. "I can try," she said. "Do it, get behind them. When you're in position, signal me. We'll draw their fire while you hit them from behind." Climbed up the wall, using maintenance handles as handholds. She opened the vent cover and disappeared into the darkness above. Minutes passed, kept her team ready, watching the barricade for any sign of movement. They were patient, waiting for the humans to make a mistake. Then signal came through her communicator. 3 clicks, she was in position. Now shouted. Her team opened fire on the barricade, forcing them to take cover. At the same moment, dropped from the ceiling behind them, her weapons blazing. Caught between 2 lines of fire, the formation collapsed. In seconds it was over. 6 lay dead, their blue blood pooling on the deck. "Move," ordered. "The cargo hold is just ahead." They ran down the corridor and reached the massive doors that led to the main prisoner holding area. The doors were locked, sealed with heavy electronic bolts. Private said, "Get us in." Was the squad's technical expert. He connected his equipment to the door's control panel and began working. His fingers moved quickly, bypassing security protocols that they had thought unbreakable. "Almost there," he muttered. "Just a few more seconds." The doors slid open. Stepped through and felt her heart break. The cargo hold was enormous, designed to carry millions of prisoners at once. and it was full. Of all ages were packed together, their purple skin pale with fear and exhaustion. Many were injured, some were dying. Children clung to their parents, crying softly. And standing among them, holding a weapon to a child's head, was an overseer. "Stop," the overseer screamed in broken galactic common. "Stop or I kill." Froze. The child in the overseer's grip was tiny, no more than 5 or 6 years old by human standards. Its large eyes were filled with terror. "Put down your weapons," the overseer continued. "Put down or all of them die. I open the cargo doors, space takes them, all of them, you understand?" Understood. The overseer had rigged the cargo doors to open if he gave the command. All the prisoners would be sucked into the vacuum of space. Millions would die in seconds. She slowly lowered her weapon. Her team followed her lead. "Good," the overseer said, its mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Now you leave, you go back to your ships. This harvest continues." Didn't respond. She was calculating distances. 15 meters to the overseer, 3 seconds at a full sprint. Could she reach him before he gave the command? The overseer saw her measuring. "Don't think it," he warned. "Don't." Moved. She crossed 15 meters in less than 3 seconds. Her body was a blur, moving faster than the overseer could track. Before he could speak, before he could send any command, her combat knife was buried in his skull. The child fell from his grip, caught it before it hit the ground. "You're safe now," she said in broken, the words she had practiced during the voyage. "We came." The child stared at her. This small, furious creature covered in blue blood, breathing hard, eyes blazing. It should have been terrifying. Everything the knew about said it should run, should hide, should fear. But it didn't feel fear. It felt something else. Safe. On the Eternal Dawn, Doctor worked without rest. The first rescued prisoners were arriving, and they were in terrible condition. Dehydration, malnutrition, injuries from beatings, psychological trauma that would take years to heal. Her medical team worked with desperate efficiency, treating patients as fast as they arrived. Human doctors who had studied biology for only 3 days were now performing surgeries that saved lives. A young healer named Tessa watched in amazement. She had been captured 2 days ago, forced to work in the Harvester's medical bay, patching up prisoners who were too valuable to let die. Now she watched aliens from treating her people with gentle hands and kind words. "Why?" Tessa asked, approaching Doctor between surgeries. "Why are you doing this?" Looked at her exhausted, eyes red from strain. "Because you needed help. But we have no alliance with your people, no trade agreements, no diplomatic relations. You came 400 light years to fight for strangers. I don't understand." Smiled tiredly. "A long time ago on our world we learned something important. When you stand alone, you fall. When you stand together, you survive. It doesn't matter if you're strangers. It doesn't matter if you're different. What matters is that someone needed help and we could give it." She placed a hand on Tessa's shoulder. "That's what it means to be human." Across the battlefield, the tide was turning. Marine boarding parties had captured 7 Harvester ships, freeing millions of prisoners. The fleet, which had once numbered over 2,000 vessels, had been reduced by half. Their formation was broken, their confidence shattered. On the command ship, Al watched his empire crumbling. He had never experienced defeat. The Dominion had conquered species after species, always winning, always growing stronger. Now these were destroying everything. "Commander," an officer reported, "our fleet has lost cohesion. Ships are fleeing into hyperspace. We cannot hold the line." Al's claws dug into his command chair. "Then we retreat. All ships fall back. We will return with a larger fleet. We will." His words were cut off as the Eternal Dawn's fighters made a precision strike on his ship's engine section. The vessel shuddered, its power fluctuating. "Commander, we've lost main engines. We cannot escape." Al looked at his where human Marines were approaching his ship. He thought about running. He thought about fighting to the death. He thought about all the species he had conquered, all the slaves he had taken, all the lives he had destroyed. For the first time in his life, he felt what his victims had felt. Fear. The Marines breached the command ship. Sargent led the assault personally, his team cutting through resistance with brutal efficiency. They fought through corridor after corridor, room after room, until they reached the bridge. Al was waiting for them, surrounded by his personal guard. The guards were elite warriors, the best the Dominion had to offer. They carried heavy weapons and wore the strongest armor. The fight lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, every guard was dead. His team had taken casualties. 2 Marines wounded, 1 critically, but they were still standing. Al stared at them with disbelief. "What are you?" he whispered. Stepped forward. "We're humans, and you're under arrest for crimes against sentient beings. You will be taken before the Galactic Council to answer for what you've done. The Council doesn't have authority over the Dominion." "They do now," raised his weapon. "Or would you prefer the alternative?" Al surrendered. The battle was over. The fleet was broken. There was free. But the work was just beginning. The aftermath of the battle lasted for weeks. Human ships moved through the debris field, searching for survivors. Medical teams worked around the clock, treating millions of wounded. Engineers helped repair damaged cities. Soldiers provided security against any who might return. Of the fleet, fewer than 300 ships had escaped into hyperspace. The rest were destroyed or captured. Over 50,000 prisoners were taken, including Commander Al himself. They would be brought before the Galactic Council to face justice. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. No one had expected this. No one had believed that any species would sacrifice so much for strangers. The whom everyone feared and avoided had crossed 400 light-years to fight for a species they had never met. On the survivors began the slow process of rebuilding. Families who had been separated were reunited. The dead were mourned. The injured were healed. And everywhere, the spoke of the humans who had saved them. Doctor spent 3 weeks on the planet, helping to establish medical facilities. She trained healers in the treatments she had developed during the voyage. She held the hands of dying patients and celebrated with those who recovered. One evening, Tessa found her sitting alone on a hillside, looking up at the stars. "You should rest," Tessa said, sitting beside her. Smiled, "I will, eventually. There's still so much to do." "You've already done so much, more than we could ever repay." "We don't want repayment," turned to look at the young. "We came because it was right, because no one should have to suffer alone, because that's what our world taught us." Tessa was quiet for a long moment. "Your world, the place that all species fear." "Yes. The Council says that nothing good can come from such a place. They say that species from are violent and dangerous, that they cannot be trusted." Looked up at the stars. "Our world is harsh. It taught us to fight, to endure, to survive. But it also taught us to protect each other, to stand together against the darkness. We learned that the only way to survive a world that wanted to kill us was to become a species that could fight for more than just ourselves." She turned back to Tessa. "Violence is not evil. It's a tool. What matters is how you use it. We use ours to protect the innocent and punish those who would harm them. That's the difference between a predator and a guardian." Tessa nodded slowly. "I think I understand. Your world made you strong enough to be gentle." Smiled, "Something like that." Far away, on the Galactic Council station, Ambassador stood before the assembled representatives of 100 species. The great chamber was filled with beings of all shapes and sizes, each one representing a different world, a different civilization. And all of them were angry at Earth. "Your actions were unauthorized," the council speaker declared. The speaker was a tall, thin being with 4 arms and skin like polished stone. You violated 17 treaties by engaging in military action without council approval. You attacked a sovereign nation. We saved 800 million lives, interrupted calmly. The speaker sputtered. That is not the point. The point is that you acted without permission. You ignored established protocols. We received the same distress call you did. His voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Every species in this room heard the begging for their lives, and every species in this room did nothing. The chamber fell silent. Walked to the center of the floor where all eyes could see her. She was small compared to most of the beings in the room, but she did not seem small. You call us, she continued. You say we evolved in hell and carry hell within us. Perhaps you're right. Our world is dangerous. It taught us to be dangerous in return, but it also taught us something that apparently no other world teaches. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative. Compassion. When someone cries for help, we answer. When the innocent suffer, we act. We do not calculate the cost of compassion. We do not weigh the risks of doing right. We simply do what must be done. She turned to face the speaker directly. While you debated protocols and treaties that were taking children from their homes, while you worried about diplomatic complications, families were being torn apart. While you did nothing, we did something. She raised her voice. And if that makes us monsters, then we are the monsters who stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. We are the monsters who answer when no one else will. We are the monsters that predators learn to fear. The chamber was absolutely silent. Straightened her shoulders. They are now under Earth's protection, permanently. Any species that threatens them threatens us. Any ship that enters their system will be destroyed without warning. Any slaver who touches their people will face our justice. She began to walk toward the exit. Consider carefully whether your grievances about treaty violations are worth testing that. She stopped at the door and looked back one final time. The galaxy feared what might do if they decided to conquer. Now you know what we do instead. We protect. We save. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Her voice softened. Don't make the mistake of thinking that makes us weak. We showed no mercy to we will show no mercy to anyone who preys on the helpless. She walked out. The chamber remained silent for a long time. Years passed. The recovered. Cities were rebuilt. Forests grew back. The purple-skinned people who had once been prey learned to live without fear for the first time in generations. Human ships continued to patrol their space, not as conquerors but as guardians. Trade routes opened. Cultural exchanges began. They learned about Earth, about its oceans and mountains and endless variety of life. They learned about human history with all its wars and atrocities, but also its acts of incredible kindness. And they learned about the humans who had saved them. Captain returned home to her daughter. She had kept her promise. She had come back. Sergeant was promoted to captain. He led a new training program, teaching Marines how to conduct rescue operations in hostile environments. Private became a legend among the stories were told about the small human warrior who had crossed 15 meters in 3 seconds to save a child. Parents told the story to their children at bedtime. It became a symbol of hope. Doctor continued her work, traveling between worlds, treating species that had never met humans before. She became known as the healer of stars. Admiral retired to a small house by the sea on Earth. He spent his days fishing and watching the waves. Sometimes he looked up at the stars and remembered the children he had seen rescued from the harvester ships. It had been worth it, he thought. All of it. And across the galaxy, the story spread. They had come, not to conquer, not to enslave, but to save people they had never met. They had asked nothing in return. They had fought against impossible odds and won. And they had shown the universe what it truly meant to be from a world that wanted to kill you. It meant you learned to fight. It meant you learned to survive. But most importantly, it meant you learned that no one should ever have to face the darkness alone. On the children grew up learning a new phrase. When they were afraid, when the night seemed too dark and the dangers too great, they would whisper it to each other, a promise and a prayer. Don't worry, the humans will come. And across the stars, in the shadows where slavers and tyrants lurked, a new fear took root. Because the humans would come. They always would. And to those who harmed the innocent, they would show no mercy. But to those who needed saving, they would show all the grace in the universe. That was what it meant to be That was what it meant to be human.